Hello. Thought I would talk to you now a little bit about carrying on from the session about Soviet expansion in Eastern Europe. Have a little think about how actually Stalin controlled these buffer zones that he'd created once he'd expanded and taken over the Eastern European states. Right. Essentially, in order to control them, Stalin introduces two very distinct groups, organisations: Cominform and Comecon. They're quite easy to get misunderstood, to get mixed up, but there's some simple rules to help you remember them. Cominform is the Communist Information Bureau. Cominform is fairly straightforward, really. All right. Now that was created in 1947. Now the purpose of Cominform was to coordinate all these new communist parties in Eastern Europe. You know, he's created this buffer zone. Well, he needs to make sure that everyone's doing the same sort of thing. Now, the key thing to remember is that at the same time that Cominform is introduced, the Americans are introducing the Truman Doctrine into Europe. Okay? So it's in direct response to America's Truman Doctrine, which is about preventing the spread of communism and helping anyone resist armed subjugation from a minority from within or without a country, from outside. But don't worry about that. There's going to be a later one of these on the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. All you need to know at this stage is that Cominform was set up in response to the Truman Doctrine. Now, there were two main purposes to Cominform. The first of which is to make sure that everyone in the satellite states, in the buffer zone, follows Soviet aims in foreign policy. Remember that one of the aims of the Soviet expansion was to ensure that Russia wasn't invaded again. Well, the best way to make sure that happens is to have a whole bunch of friendly communist states surrounding you, all doing the same thing in terms of foreign policy. Fairly straightforward, actually quite sensible. And the second thing is to make sure that all those new communist states in Eastern Europe follow the same economic policies as Russia. Now, there are two main policies. The first of which is collectivization, and that's basically where you get all the farmers together and you lump all the land together. No one owns it, it's owned by the state or by the collective farm, and everyone works together on the farm to produce. And whatever is produced is sold, and the profits are shared amongst the collective workers. But in reality they kind of weren't, they were just taken by the state. So collectivization, peasants combining together, no private farms at all, none, just state-owned farms. And the second thing was state control of industry. Now, this is a key feature of communism, as you know, from the start of the course when we talk about what communism, what capitalism actually is. So, Cominform is used by the Soviet Union, in addition to this, to get rid of anyone who opposes or disagrees with Moscow, with what Russia wants. Now, a perfect example of this is Marshal Tito, who I spoke about a little bit earlier, who was the leader of Yugoslavia. He was basically thrown out of Cominform in 1948 for the wicked crime of not doing what they wanted. Okay, so if you didn't toe Moscow's line, out you went, and you were off. Okay, didn't really do Tito much harm, really. The second of the organisations that Stalin and Russia used to control this new buffer zone, these satellite states, was Comecon. Now, if Cominform is about information, Comecon is about economics. I told you it wasn't too hard. Okay. Now, Comecon is for the Council for Mutual Assistance. All right, 1949. Now, if Cominform is in response to the Truman Doctrine, Comecon is in response to Marshall Aid, which is the Americans giving $17 billion to European countries to rebuild them after the war. But more about that later. Now, the aim of Comecon was to help, was for the USSR to financially support Eastern European states. And so what Stalin does is he offers economic aid to countries to recover from World War II, because basically there's been a lot of fighting going on, a lot of these economies are destroyed, huge amount of damage caused by the fighting. And so Stalin's going to say, look, I'll give you cash, I'll help you rebuild your economies. But in reality, it was a little bit different to that. It was a good excuse. The actual reason for it is that it gave Stalin control of the satellite states' economies. It could tell them what to do. Essentially makes Russia's economy even bigger. And it gave the USSR access to the resources of the satellite states. Now, Russia needs raw materials, and all these friendly satellite states have coal, iron, etc., which Russia can get cheap and access to. So it helps rebuild the Russian economy as well. That does actually become a kind of a sticking point when we talk about the Hungarian uprising. It's one of the reasons why they don't like the Russians so much. Okay, so Comecon, Cominform, one's about information and control, and one's about the economic policies. Remember, they are due to the American policies of the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan. All right, rewind it, listen, play, write some notes, read your book. Bye.